Hey there, junior scientists. Welcome to class. We're jumping right into a brand new explainer today, and we're tackling a really big question. What exactly makes a biological species? You know, we hear the word species tossed around all the time, right? Endangered species, newly discovered species, your favorite species of pet. But in the biology world, what does that actually mean? Well, that's exactly the puzzle we're going to solve together today.
Let's quickly check out today's lesson plan on the board. We've got 5 stops on this explainer. 1. What is a species? 2. Spotting the differences. 3. The ultimate species test. 4. The Liger exception. And finally, 5. Let's test your knowledge.
All right, part 1. What actually is a species? We're going to kick things off by making a super simple observation, kind of like we're just hanging out in a backyard garden. Put on your scientist hats and let's take a look. So, take a really close look at these 3 birds hanging out on this branch. They look pretty similar in their overall shape and size, don't they? But they aren't exactly the same. You've got one that's mostly yellow, one's bright green with a splash of blue, and the other is mostly blue and gray. So, how would you decide if they belong to the exact same species, or if they're 2 or maybe even 3 totally different species? Keep that mystery in the back of your mind as we keep going. Moving on to part 2, spotting the differences. To figure out the answer to our bird puzzle, we actually need to scale things up a bit. Let's step into a much bigger enclosure and practice spotting some physical similarities and differences on a slightly grander scale. Check out these 2 massive, absolutely magnificent creatures. On the left, we've got an Indian elephant, and over on the right, an African elephant. Now, if you were to pull out your notebooks right now and list their physical similarities, you'd probably jot down, they both have trunks, they've got tusks, they have huge bodies. But look at the differences. The African elephant has those massive ears, and the actual shape of their backs and heads are totally different. Scientists do this exact same exercise. They look really carefully at specimens to compare different kinds of organisms. But here's where it gets a little tricky. Even within the exact same group, absolutely no 2 animals are totally identical. Think about your classmates for a second. You're all humans, obviously, but you all look completely different from one another. Biologists call this variation. For example, within just the Indian elephant species, some might have much straighter tusks than others, or maybe some have little pink markings on their skin in totally different spots. This natural variation is perfectly normal between individuals of the exact same species. So, the really crucial takeaway here is that deciding on a species just by looking at them, it's tough, because variation exists between individuals. Organisms of the same species definitely share characteristics, but they aren't perfect carbon copies. If we strictly relied on looks, we might actually accidentally categorize 2 Indian elephants with slightly different tusk shapes as completely different species. No way, right? So scientists realized looks just aren't enough. They had to observe behavior, and specifically, reproduction. You see, Indian elephants reproduce only with other Indian elephants. They do not reproduce with African elephants. And that exact observation led to a pretty groundbreaking rule. Which brings us to part 3, the ultimate species test. Let's dive right into what this biological test actually is, because it's literally the gold standard that scientists around the world use today to classify all living things. Now, before I hand over the test, we need to master 2 absolutely vital vocabulary words. The whole core of this test relies on understanding fertile and infertile. Fertile means an organism is able to produce offspring. Basically, it can have its own babies, who can then grow up and have their own babies. Infertile is the exact opposite. It means an organism cannot reproduce. It's a biological dead end. Make sense? Fertile means babies, infertile means no babies. And that brings us to the main event. Seriously, etch this definition right into your mental notebooks. The official biological definition of a species is a group of organisms that can reproduce together to produce fertile offspring. It's not just about having babies, it's about having babies that can grow up and have their own babies. If they can pull that off, they belong to the exact same species. By applying this golden rule, scientists found that organisms from completely different species typically cannot reproduce with one another. I mean, a dog and a cat can't have a puppy kitten. An African elephant and an Indian elephant don't reproduce together. They stick to their own kind to pass down their specific traits to the next generation. That, right there, is the boundary line of a species. But hey, biology is a total adventure, and it's full of some massive surprises, which perfectly leads us into part 4, the Liger exception. I mean, just look at the sheer size of the animal on the right. Very, very rarely, if a male lion and a female tiger are placed in the same enclosure at a zoo, they will sometimes actually reproduce together. Now, in the wild, they wouldn't normally hang out, but in captivity, it happens. And the incredible result is the young animal you see on the far right, a massive, absolutely fascinating creature called a liger. Now, what's super fascinating here is this specific detail from our source material. It says ligers are healthy animals, but ligers cannot reproduce. They cannot have offspring. They are infertile. Think back to those vocabulary words we just went over. The liger might be strong, it might be perfectly healthy, and it's obviously huge, but it is entirely infertile. Because the liger cannot produce its own kids, it's a biological dead end. And remember our ultimate species test? To be the exact same species, the parents must produce fertile offspring. The lion and the tiger? Well, they produced an infertile offspring. Therefore, they completely fail the ultimate species test. This is literally the perfect proof of why biologists insist that lions and tigers must be classified as totally separate species. Sure, they can technically create a baby in a zoo, but that baby cannot carry on the family line. All right, scientists, time to clear your desks. We are on part 5. Let's test your knowledge. It's time to put everything we've talked about to the test with a really quick pop quiz to see how well you've mastered today's concepts. For our first practice question, I want you to pick the right word to fill in the blank. Ready? Organisms that belong to the same species usually look blank to one another. Are they bigger, different, identical, or similar? Shout it out at the screen if you know it. If you guessed similar, you are absolutely correct. Remember, organisms of the same species definitely share characteristics, but they are never perfectly identical. We saw that with the Indian elephants, right? Some have slightly different tusks or skin markings. That natural biological variation means similar is the absolute best scientific word to use here.
Great job. Okay, question number 2. Let's finish this thought. They look blank from organisms belonging to other species. How do they look compared to animals completely outside of their group?
You nailed it. The answer is different. I mean, an elephant looks very different from a tiger, right? They share almost no physical characteristics because they belong to entirely different species groups. All right, here is your final essay question, the absolute true test of today's explainer. Explain to me the exact biological reason why lions and tigers are considered separate species, despite the fact that they can occasionally make a liger together in a zoo. Think back to those vocabulary words. And here is the perfect biological proof. The answer is that their offspring, this adorable but biologically complicated little liger cub, is totally infertile. Because it cannot have its own babies, the lion and tiger officially failed the ultimate test for defining a species. The ability to create fertile offspring is the absolute key to the whole puzzle. Let's do a quick run-through of our summary checklist on the board. Can you compare organisms of different species, like the African and Indian elephant? Yep. Can you describe what species means? Yes, a group that produces fertile offspring together. Can you explain how scientists decide on a species? By testing if the offspring are fertile. If you can confidently check off everything on this list, you have successfully mastered today's middle school biology lesson. Give yourselves a huge pat on the back. Before the bell rings and I let you out of class, I'm going to leave you with this final scientific mystery to chew on. Imagine you're deep in the rainforest and you discover 2 totally new animals. They look completely 100% different from one another, but they actually managed to produce perfectly fertile offspring together. Based on the strict biological rule we literally just learned today, does that mean they are technically the exact same species? Think about what actually takes priority for a biologist, looks or reproduction. Keep exploring, keep asking those big questions, and I will catch you on the next explainer.